What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you, as always, with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes, who is also, I guess, the celebrity crush of fellow co-host Dan Favale's wife, we've established. So shout out to Grant for that. Grant, we're going to get into another look ahead. We're on to the Southwest. This will be the fourth or the fifth division. We'll have 20 offseason look aheads done, and we've already amended some of them because stuff that happened. We talked about them. Look at us on top of our shit. This is being recorded on, what is today? Friday afternoon. I will not be updating it if shit goes sideways. We put out an Alex Caruso podcast, so keep that in mind. We're on to the Southwest, though, but Grant, first and foremost, how the heck are you doing?
I just tickled to be one labeled a celebrity. That's pretty loose use of that term.
I've seen you on my TV screen before, so that counts as, to me, that counts as a celebrity. And good plug, we will be on Bleacher Report and the Max app doing a free agency stream on, oh my God, the day of free agency, right? June 30th from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific time. Go check us out. Come in the comments and say nice things about Grant and mine's appearance so that we don't get like mean stuff, but come in with like good comments and stuff, because some of them can be rough when we have to field those and they're just like not related to anything we're talking about. So
right
for that. And then Grant will have proven that he is in fact a celebrity.
Yeah, that's been the goal all along, really.
That's why you got into this, is for the money and the fame, right?
That's 100%. It's going great.
Southwest. We have the reigning Western Conference champion, Dallas Mavericks. They are the reactions to their, and this will, I think it'll dovetail nicely with the fallout from their finals. Derrick Jones Jr. is their only notable free agent. They do not have bird rights on him, so they will need to use an exception to sign him. Their salary cap situation, though, could make that difficult. They're basically right at the tax before handing out a deal to Derrick Jones Jr. or anybody else. That would leave them essentially with, I would say it'd probably be the mini MLE if they didn't do anything else. I don't think that'll be enough, the $5.2 million to keep DJJ. But they can open up the bigger MLE by moving off some salary. Tim Hardaway Jr.'s name has been floated a bunch. No notable extension eligibilities coming up this offseason. I think when you look at what this roster needs, I've penciled in another ball handler or scorer who could put defenses in rotation. I think right now the third closest they get to that, or the closest they get to that behind Luka and Kyrie, is probably PJ Washington or Jaden Hardy and sometimes Josh Green. They could definitely maybe use a stretch big upgrade from Maxi Kleber, although just at $11 million and being familiar, I don't know if you can actively do that. And then they definitely do need like two-way wings where you don't have to think about, okay, we know Exum and Derrick Jones Jr. can do this, but will come at the expense of any of our shooting. So where do you, I guess the place to take this beforehand is, do you think, some people think that they need kind of major changes after the way they lost in the finals to the Celtics? Where have you sort of landed on that?
I can't get there. I can understand, like, well, some of the limitations that the Celtics exposed, like a lack of guys beyond Kyrie and Luka that can, advance the offense when they're sort of dared to by a defense. Like, sure, Boston's defense is just different. And so, yeah, you want to get better, but I don't know that you use your inability to succeed against the Celtics as a reason to be like, well, clearly we're not good enough. It's like, well, you're not good enough to beat them. Nobody else is. So that doesn't mean you just stand pat, but I don't feel the urgency. Do you? I mean, the urgency I feel is more tied to like the Derrick Jones side of it. Cause I mean, partly because that's the only thing to talk about, but like, I don't think the mini MLE is enough. No. So I do think you're going to, if you want to keep him, then you are going to have to figure some things out. Or you swing a little bigger and you throw your firsts into some kind of trade for your Jeremy Grants, your Kyle Kuzmas, like that kind of thing, which would, I think, probably be an upgrade over Jones on balance. But like, considering the role you're asking that guy to play, like not a huge one. So I don't know if you want a $30 million guy replacing Derrick Jones, because how much better is he going to be, considering like you're not going to be the primary or secondary playmaker, on down the line. So that's where I'm kind of focusing right now.
I'm wondering if they could do sort of both, Justin. And I'm also wondering, just because we've seen Malik Monk is not even going to test free agency or real free agency. Pascal Siakam didn't get the 5th year. I'm just wondering if teams are going to be tighter with their purse strings in general, so that we're just assuming someone will give Derrick Jones Jr. even the room exception of $8 million. Will that be out there? for him. So maybe I think there's a chance he comes cheaper than we're thinking. I would be shocked if that level of cheaper is the mini MLE though.
I agree. And I think since this is our new pet theory, the PJ Washington is just suddenly better in a winning situation. I do think you have to consider the reverse of it for someone like Derek Jones, who has looked very good in specific circumstances, like at the top of Miami zone, and then not very good elsewhere, and then suddenly good again when he's in a role where just he only has to play to his strengths. So maybe that is an argument that something like the room exception could get it done. But yeah, I agree. Like no matter what, just the mini MLE feels like, I mean, it's barely above the minimum.
Do you think, and I'm not, but by the way, if teams and players, if the players want to do this, I'm not against teams doing it because the NBA clearly doesn't care really about tampering based off the penalties they give. He's 27. If you give him the 1+1 at the minimum raise and he knows he's going to get the early bird deal regardless, like that would change the complexion of their offseason a lot.
Yeah, right.
Because all of a sudden you don't need to move any salary to keep him, and you're focused. If you're moving Tim Hardaway Jr., for instance, you focus on getting a player back that fits within that salary structure rather than, well, we need to cut X to afford Derek Jones Jr. He hasn't been paid enough to where he can leave that on a whim, but he is 27 and it's sort of a wink, wink. I know it's pretty clear that Mark Cuban isn't really the whole, he's going to be in control of basketball operations until forever lasted all of like 60 seconds. It's either how long does it take ink to dry? That's probably when it, when I found out there was no written agreement for that, I was just like, all right, this is just whatever. He's into the pharmaceutical business now. That's fine. But that is something to consider. However, even if they're moving salary to keep DJJ, I'd still like the idea of either we talked about putting defense, like getting that guy who can put defense in rotation, or just someone who's more of a two-way wing or forward. I still like trying to go get that guy. And you mentioned two names that I love for them. If Jeremy Grant wasn't making so much money, they can get to it, but I don't know how tenable the salary structure becomes. Yeah. So that would be perfect. I don't hate the idea of Kyle Kuzma here. I think you probably want someone who's a better shooter, but you would be so fucking big. PJ Washington, a big Kyle Kuzma, and Luka. Those are all dudes who are at least 6'8". Is that what Kyle Kuzma is? So and his salary declines. So I like that. I've also mentioned Bogdan Bogdanovic would be perfect for this team. And I don't know where Atlanta's at, would have enough to get him. And I'll actually throw this deal to you. I wrote about it, but there was also a debate in it. Shout out to our Discord users, link in the podcast and YouTube description, who apparently read our stuff. Like I'll see our links pop up in there from time to time without us dropping them. My deal was use Tim Hardaway Jr., Omax, and a protected 2025 first round pick for Bogdan Bogdanovic. And there was kind of a spirited debate as to whether that was too much. I didn't think it was too much, but I'm curious would you do that if you're Dallas? Is that enough for Atlanta to think about it?
I would do it if I were Dallas. Because I think Bogdanovic is pretty clearly the best player in that deal, and that should be that's objective one at this point for a team in Dallas's position is just upgrade. We need to have more talent. And I don't think the sweeteners there are maybe Omax becomes something, but it's kind of like, what was the situation I was thinking about for another team today? It's just in general, if and when this guy becomes it's almost like Anthony Black a little bit to similar situations. Like Orlando's a playoff team now. Anthony Black might be awesome, but next season, it's unlikely he's going to help more than a middling free agent. Right. So so I think that kind of logic applies here a little bit too. So however good you think Omax might be, you're talking about 2027 maybe, or something like that. And for Dallas, that might as well be 2057, I think. That's exaggeration, but you take my point. So yeah, I would do that. I was messing around. I was for the Jeremy Grant trade, is it just Hardaway Kleba 25 first, 2031 first? Is that enough? Do you do that?
Portland should absolutely do that. The 2031 first for Jeremy Grant makes me wildly uneasy if I'm Dallas.
Yeah, sure. Because now you're really this. You're saying this is our move. We're we are completed now. Which is are you?
I've also kind of wondered. I don't love Josh Green's fit on this team anymore, and maybe there's also teams they would value him or Jaden Hardy differently. I also don't think they should be above dangling Daniel Gafford in talks. I just don't know how valuable he becomes to them in postseason settings in terms of navigating the regular season. I get it, but everyone feels like it's looked at it through the prism of the same with us is. Well, there's Kleba, there's Tim Hardaway Jr., but if they really want to, you just quarter off Derek Lively, PJ Washington, Luka, and Kyrie. There's a bunch of different other types of deals that they could build.
And I think too, I hadn't thought about that. It may be a little more logical to think of Gafford as matching salary. Like he's not just matching salary. He's not like the Bojan Bogdanovic, for the Knicks
Right.
or whatever. But like if Lively is who you think he is and who he looks like he's going to be, you kind of don't. You shouldn't need another guy at the same position who does a lot of the same stuff, but generally not as well. Like you need a minimum guy backing him up, probably, if Lively is what he has sort of looked like he's going to become. So
yeah. That's a good point too. It's like he should be ready for more minutes, and if you think he's healthy, Daniel Gafford right now is a bit stronger, and there are some things he does like he's gonna stand up to those, I think, burlier bigs better, but
sure.
in terms of defensive versatility, and you could probably maybe find a cheaper big. I even like this doesn't satisfy that, and I don't know if the Pelicans, but like Larry Nance Jr. is sort of like a different look from Maxi Kleba. I mean, you're exchanging one kind of versatile, injury prone big for another one, but
but like, one that skews a little more towards playmaking, which Nance does, which if you're trying to address the like, well, somebody else do something with the ball, I think he's, he could be helpful there.
Do you think would you give up a 2031 first round pick for Denny Avdia on this team?
Yeah, I think I would. Just because of the timeline stuff. I know it's dumb because Luka is still young enough, but it's like, it's hard to get better than this, so you need to make that move now.
They honestly have one of the hardest jobs. Like they're up there with the Nuggets and the Timberwolves, where it's like you are right there, and getting from right there to where the Celtics are, especially when the Celtics are the Celtics. Yeah, that's like the hardest. There's like 5 to 7 teams that probably fall in that bucket, and Dallas is one of them.
Yeah, like anything that makes you better at this level is going to require like an uncomfortable outlay of something, and maybe that's the 2031 pick.
Free agency targets for them. Dorian Finney-Smith should be mentioned as a trade target, just old friend Dorian Finney-Smith. But what they're looking at, whether they're going to be working with minimums or are they going to be using their exception on someone else, depending on what happens with Derrick Jones Jr. But Torrey Craig is a player option. Malik Beasley's floating around out there. Taurean Prince can soak up some time. Luke Kennard, if his team option gets declined. I know that you have Tim Hardaway Jr., but if you need to move Tim Hardaway Jr. and you want a cheaper version of a motion shooter, he might be out there, has bad knees, of course. I actually like Jalen Smith has a player option. I don't know what it would take to get him, but if he's in mini MLE territory still and just wants multiple years, I don't hate him on this team, but those are just some names for consideration.
Yeah, I like all those. Should we move on to Houston?
Let's do it.
All right, so free agents for them. They got a couple of really interesting ones because of the contract structures. Jock Landale and Jayshawn Tate. Landale has those weird, I think 14 more seasons, and they're all non-guaranteed in a row at like $8 million. And so Jayshawn Tate's got a team option. Jeff Green also a team option. Marjanovic, Aaron Holiday, Reggie Bullock, also free agents. So
I still don't know why Reggie Bullock went there this past season. Please carry on.
It didn't make any sense, right? Like, did you think you were going to play? So they can have cap space, but this is another situation where it probably makes more sense for them to operate as an over the cap team, and which would free up their best spending tool, hypothetically, as a non-taxpayer MLE. That's $12.9 million, which if you've been listening to us, we've said that several times. I think maybe where we should start, because it kind of affects some of what they're going to do roster building wise in a bigger way, is both Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün are extension eligible. And there was reporting probably a month or so ago, I can't remember now, the offseason's a blur, that from Tim McMahon of ESPN, that like both those guys might not get those extensions, and one or the other could be involved in I think big swing was the verbiage, big swing trade. So we haven't talked about this. What do you think about those two extensions? Is it like do them both, figure it out later, let them both go to restricted free agency next summer, one or the other?
Are you ready for some hedging? If the number is so noticeably below what you're thinking, like if both those guys want the max, then no, don't sign them. It's better to work with their small cap holds, because their books are so clean because of that Fred VanVleet team option next year. So they could have a ton of cap space. But if like Alperen Şengün is willing to sign for $25 million a year or something, like, yeah, you should sign that. But that organization, do you agree, does not seem sold on Şengün as a building block?
Well, I mean, that was 100% the case a year ago because of the Brook Lopez.
I was even using McMahon's reporting as like, I get Jalen Green because of kind of who's in place, and Amen Thompson is there, and if you want the ball in his hands. But like Alperen Şengün is like, that dude was almost an all-star this past year. Jalen Green has never had an entire season as good as the one as we just saw from Alperen Şengün. And I get where the league is headed, but we've seen teams kind of build around bigs before. So maybe I'm misreading it, but if they're open to, you can always say so-and-so is not untouchable for the right player. I get that, but this feels like something different.
Well, so do you think? I mean, if you've got to choose between the two, if it's me, I won't say you. I think even with the hot month that Green put up at the end of the
The
year
hot
and all that
month.
stuff, which like you have to reference anytime you talk about him, because that was like, oh, that's the theory of why Jalen Green was the number 2 pick. That is like
We
what's
say
more
that like every
valuable,
March. So like,
right? But this time they won. This time that's what's different, or that's what I have to keep saying whenever I bring it up. I still think Şengün is the one I would just choose if it's like an either or. But I wouldn't feel comfortable about it. I mean, I understand why they're kind of looking, because the Bills come and do like bang, bang, bang off seasons in order, because you've got Jabari Smith coming up.
yeah.
You're going to have Amin Thompson after that. Cam Whitmore's with him in that class. So
You
like
have the number
every
3 pick
summer,
this year too.
who this year?
They have the number 3 pick this year too,
Right.
unless they
So there's
lose it.
another one. So every summer, as it stands, like kind of a good problem, but your good lottery picks are going to start coming due for extensions. And so you're going to lock yourself in sooner than later.
If they, I'm gonna, well, it'll spell chaos. Imagine they just draft Donovan and Clingan at number 3, and one, I will eviscerate that decision if they do it. But then it's like, okay, well, when are you moving Şengün and or Jabari? Jabari could play next to him, of course, but that would be like the whole. If they did that,
Yeah.
what the fuck is going on in Houston?
Yeah. So I mean, I don't really know what this is. This isn't like Utah where it's like whatever, anything. But I do think Houston has like a lot of options here, obviously, because they have trade candidates, they got salaries to move, they've got that pick that they could trade away.
So let's do this exercise. It's a dual one of whether they should be interested, and would you include Jalen Green or Alperen Şengün in the trade for said player? So
Okay.
should they be interested in Mikal Bridges?
Yeah.
Would you? And again, that would impact the draft equity. I would trade Jalen Green for Mikal Bridges. I think we're both in agreement with that.
Yeah.
Would you include Alperen Şengün? I'm not saying in addition. I'm just in a vacuum in a Mikal Bridges trade.
I mean, I don't like that as much, just because. I mean, if it's like straight up, because I don't think there's a scenario where you're giving up a bunch of firsts, which the Nets seem to want for Bridges. Like, you're not giving back the Nets their drafts with Şengün. I would be more comfortable giving back a portion of it with Green, for a number of reasons. Like positionally, I think Amin Thompson has a great chance of being a better prospect ultimately, and you're just like you're making more of a win now move. If you trade Şengün, it's a lot harder to say like we're just trying to get better in the immediate. Whereas if you trade Green, I think for Bridges, like Bridges just makes you better than Green does. Whereas Şengün, it's like he was almost an all-star too. He might be a better player than Bridges, albeit not as portable.
I will say it's interesting that they're linked to Bridges, because we didn't really get into this, but he doesn't necessarily check any of their major boxes of needs. Like they could use a more dynamic wing for sure, which he is, but like I think their 2 biggest needs for me are like higher volume knockdown outside shooting, and then a different type of floor general, because Amin Thompson's going to take time to bake, and Fred VanVleet is just, we saw what he could do on the driving game, but like that's not his style. You kind of also need that floor general too. Well, if you're trading Alperen Şengün, you don't need him to, but if he's still going to be there, someone who can also play off of him. And Mikal Bridges, yes, can play off of him, but he's not like, he doesn't really satisfy. He kind of checks, he like partially checks a bunch of different boxes. Is no caps lock. Oh, he does this for, I like the fit, but he fits everywhere.
Right. That's the thing. Maybe I was too quick to say like, oh yeah, they should. I mean, because everybody should be interested in Bridges. But like, it is interesting if you view Fred VanVleet as someone who, I mean, it was a 3-year deal, so it's like he's not a full stopgap, but like, if you hold on to him through this season, he's going to be an expiring salary in 25, 26. Like,
or you just decline his option. He'd be an expiring salary now.
Sure. So, but by then, like maybe Thompson has developed enough of the playmaking chops you want, and then if you have Bridges in that scenario, we know he's overtaxed as a primary creator, but if you ask him to be your second or third guy, and in this scenario, if you also have Şengün, like the playmaking's there. It's not, you don't have the conventional point guard, but you could have. So anyway, we didn't think we'd get to the point of like, what if they move Fred VanVleet because those other guys are ready? But a lot of optionality.
I'll frame it this way. I think there are 2 players they should be interested in if they become available. They should be a sneaky Donovan Mitchell team. And I know that Cleveland wouldn't have interest in Şengün, but like I'd absolutely give up if Don Mitchell says I will stay here. Should he not sign an extension in Cleveland? I would give up Şengün for him, and then you're rallying in a third team, maybe the Pelicans facilitated or something. What about Trae Young?
So and you probably are sending out Green in that deal, right? And then
So every name that I'm about to list, I would absolutely trade Jalen Green for.
okay.
To me, it's more of an exercise in would you trade. I don't want to assign that to you though, but it's
Well,
more of would you give up Alperen Şengün to get Donovan Mitchell's coming and staying?
yeah, I think I would. Although I don't love I love the fit with Mitchell, and if Thompson develops into what we think he's going to be, I don't love it with Van Vliet because that's kind of Darius Garland all over again.
Except
Um,
Van Vliet is a better
Van
defender,
Vliet's a better defender and he's tougher, but you still have the same undersized
but
issues
only
and
for
like
a year, right? Or maybe a maximum of 2 if
yeah,
you want to keep the salary slot.
yeah. I guess it's a better fit than Garland, but I still don't love it because I would like Mitchell to be able to just always. Well, that's actually better. The more I think about it,
Are you higher on the Mitchell fit or the Trae Young fit?
I'm definitely higher on the Mitchell fit because Trae Young
So
I know
ball dominant.
Mitchell was like pretty ball dominant, but not to the degree that like just Trae Young just changes everything you do. Don't you think like it's
I would argue that you almost have to trade Alperen Şengün if you're getting Trae.
yeah, maybe so because you just Sengun's one of his best skills is the playmaking, and it's like he's not going to be in a position to do that as much. Like multiple playmakers is good though, so I don't know, but
Here's the final one, and then we can just list off some free agency targets they should be interested in. And this might be my favorite one, LaMelo Ball.
yeah, that's pretty fun. That's I think I like that one a lot
I would
because
give up Şengün for him, and I know there's risk there. He's already on his max, has the ankle issue stuff. There's some off court concerns, but
yeah, it's harder for me with Şengün. Although like we love Şengün, but there are still questions about like how can you win at the highest level with that type of center? If that is your last line, maybe Amin Thompson just becomes so good and you can figure it out between him and Brooks and whoever and Jabari. Like
yeah, just having all the like Tari Eason.
yeah, right. Even like they're so loaded with like even like I still love Jayshawn Tate. I still think he can like so yeah. Anyway,
Um,
what free agents do you like here?
so if we're like MLE territory, Tyus Jones is kind of another stopgap. Do you take Markelle Fultz is probably a bad fit with Amin Thompson there. This might be a pretty good Tobias Harris team
Yeah,
having him come off the bench. Gary Trent Jr., Luke Kennard, if he becomes a free agent. If you want to take a flyer on Monte Morris, if you're kind of just because I think I can't remember if it was Raphael Stone or Udoka. It was probably Raphael Stone, given the context, said after the season that they're not. I know Tim McMahon had that reporting, and I trust Tim McMahon to death, but they kind of made it seem like we're just going to let this marinate. And so then we're talking about all these trade targets. What are they going to do with the mid-level? Does this just end up with them kind of futzing and fiddling on the margins has been the phrase that I've used ad nauseum throughout this process, to where someone on the minimum like a Monte Morris, or they like looking at Cameron Payne or just something, and like those are the moves, because like they're an overlogged rotation. If Tari Eason's healthy, if Jayshawn Tate is, just look at all these bodies that have cases to play on this
yeah,
team right now.
right. Yeah, no, as I'm thinking, I was looking through the list, like, well, I like DeAnthony Melton, maybe. I don't know if that's going to be
Ooh.
mid-level money or not, but it's like, well, then the Rockets are deep. Like, it's hard for me to say, like, oh, they clearly need this. Like, you listed some needs that they have, and sure, but it's like in a lot of cases for them, it's well, if this guy internally gets a little better, then that's not a need anymore. Like, what if Cam Whitmore just is like an ace bench scorer or more than that? Or like, what if Thompson learns to shoot? What if Jabari Smith takes another step? It's just like you're just removing these theoretical needs that way. And so maybe the play is like, let's kick the can a year. Let's futz and fiddle, like you say, and we just see which of these guys turn into something better than they currently are. Because some of them will. It's just a question of which ones.
Oh, and especially because they're just going to have, unless you're going super high end in terms of trade targets, you're just going to have the number 3 prospect who are you just not going to play. Maybe are they the Nikola Topic team who's been drafting down boards because of his ACL injury? Like, we don't even really need him to play next year, so let him rehab and like bring him along slowly. I'm not saying that's what they should do, but yeah, I ultimately think, or I'll phrase it this way: if they do something, it's going to be seismic because of what it would have to mean for it to make sense for their rotation and not to have this massive trickle down effect.
Also, do you think they should just trade down? I think from 3, just because like You said the guy's not going to play, probably. I mean, or I don't know. Maybe he will if they shuffle up the rest of the roster. But I like the idea of just like we are one of the better teams in this top chunk of this draft. Like we don't need this. There should be more desperate
Well,
teams that are
right.
younger that
But like
want that
I
number
could
3 pick.
see, I don't know if he'd be drafted like a Dalton. If you want to trade down for a Dalton Connect, or could this be the Reed Shepherd team? Like, let's just get there and he'll play. Let's try and bring his shooting. It's complimentary. He can do some stuff on ball. But then it's like, well, where are those minutes come? Like, let's just list at full strength. Here are the names that need to play: Şengün, Jabari Smith, Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, Tari Eason, Amen Thompson. That's 6 must-haves, and I'm already forgetting. Who else am I forgetting?
Maybe Whitmore. Whitmore
showed? Holy shit! Like we haven't even mentioned him yet. So it's just like that's 7 who have to play. Yeah. I'm forgetting someone major. I mean,
Steven Adams is on this team. Like he
okay,
like there's I don't know if you said VanVleet. Like there's just like I know
Jason Tate doesn't have to play, but he's also good.
Yeah. No, this is so again. All good problems. I feel like Houston is like team good problems right now.
The best way to phrase it is I don't know if they use their full non-taxpayer mid-level. I don't necessarily know to what end that it feels like. Would that be more breaking? I don't think the non-taxpayer mid-level gets them someone who definitely deserves to play over the guys that we're just about to list off. Oh, I didn't mention Jalen Green. What's the name? I forgot.
Well, we've already traded him 7 times in the last 10 minutes, so maybe he won't be there. Not an oversight by you.
We are on to the Memphis Grizzlies. Their only notable free agent could be Luke Kennard, $14.7 million team option. Their salary cap situation, they're like close to $9 million inside of the tax. If they decline Kennard's team option, if they pick it up in full, they would be over the tax. I don't think that they will stay in the tax if they were to do that. I would say their best spending tool is probably going to be that $12.9 million mid-level, because I'm guessing they will cut enough salary just to have that wiggle room. But again, this could be a team that winds up with the mini MLE, or maybe they're just not even spending their MLE. They do have a couple of notable extension candidates. Zaire Williams, his max would be, I'm just kidding, but he is extension eligible. And then Jaren Jackson Jr. is the interesting one, is he could sign a 3-year, $106.2 million extension. That's like, if I'm him, I'm probably declining it, but I don't look at that number and think, oh, that's blasphemous for Jaren Jackson Jr. to consider that.
And it's especially weird because his last deal is declining. Like I didn't remember that, but he's going to make 27 next year and then 23.
That damages the ceiling on his extension money too.
It does.
You have to extend off that number.
It's also like, maybe he just wants, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I think circumstances are different now, because I can't remember the exact timing, but that extension probably was when there were like real injury questions, because he just kept missing huge chunks of the season. But I mean, maybe he still operates from a position of like, let me get locked in money, and if I'll take maybe a slightly below market deal if I can lock in $100 million. It's hard to frame that as like a bad life choice, but I offer that if I'm Memphis, and you do too, right? And you hope he takes it.
Yeah, oh yeah, I would hope that he takes it. That I think it would end up being a steal, but it's kind of like that Mikal Bridges extension. What was it, 3 for 112? I'm like, that's not ridiculous for him to consider it. No. Santi Aldama is also extension eligible, his rookie scale. So that might be something. If he's like, what if he said, I'll sign for 330, like in 36? Like, I'll pounce at that. I'll take it.
Probably.
So my first question here is, what do you expect them to do when you're kind of, I know I framed it as a choice between Luke Kennard, but like they have other fungible salary. If they want to give up on Zaire Williams, they could try and get that, $6.1 million cap hit off the books. They have, where are they at with Jake LaRavia? They have Derrick Rose on there. They have John Conchars making, that's when his extension kicks in at 6.2. So they have other means to shed enough salary to access the non-taxpayer mid-level. Do you, I think we're both in agreement here, you don't expect them to pay the tax next year, right?
No, I don't think so.
Do you think that they will access the bigger MLE or not?
I was trying to think in terms of how you're framing it with the Rockets, and like, so if they do really well with that signing, hypothetically, is that someone that's going to play a lot or enough to justify that over who they have? And kind of like Houston, it's not that easy to say yes to that. So I guess I don't know what I think they'll do, but I think you could defend them for not trying to access that, on the thinking that like, well, we know we got Morant, Bane, Smart, Jackson, that's a ton of minutes going there. Brandon Clark's going to play again. And then like between Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams Jr., who emerged last year, like that might be 2 more rotation spots gone. And now we're into the reserves. And so, yeah, like, and you said, like maybe Conchar plays, maybe Kennard probably isn't back, but like Aldama's still there. To me, this seems like a team that it makes more sense to bundle up some of these, like, well, maybe they'll be good, maybe they won't, like mid-tier salaries and try to trade them. But as a way to potentially move up if you think they really need Donovan Clingan. I know I'm getting like ahead of it, but I do think like a legit big guy is one of their needs. And maybe that guy's not there at 9. Maybe he is. I don't know. But I don't have like a guy out there where it's like, if they get him for the mid-level, that's definitely someone that will play ahead of all of the, some number of the guys I just mentioned.
I think where I would be concerned is that if you're not keeping Luke Kennard, just like the shooting on this team gets very rough. And so if you went out and let's just assume he leaves, or maybe you're re-signing him at a smaller number, but let's just say he leaves, like a Malik Beasley, I would think would play for this team, or Gary Harris even would absolutely play for this team. Simone Fontecchio would be a very interesting fit here. I don't know if the mid-level gets him out of Detroit, though. I think their biggest needs, you mentioned a big man, I'd be with you. I think it's shooting, and then also kind of just two-way wings, preferably with ball skills. So like getting a little bit more out of that spot maybe than a Gigi Jackson. I don't think you're going to address that with the mid-level. That feels like more of a trade, although this would be a good Najee Marshall team, as well. Everyone's a good Najee Marshall team. But
well, I mean, let's go back a year. The thinking was with Marcus Smart, like, okay, well, if John Morant's out, he's our point guard for a minute, and he's also going to replace Dylan Brooks. I don't know how confident they should be in the security of their backup point guard spot, because if Smart is hurt again or ineffective, then it's like that's Derrick Rose's music, like to back up Morant as a playmaker. And maybe so.
And Smart's season was tough to separate from, was he actually this bad? Because he was bad, like
Right.
offensively, in terms of just like the turnovers of the playmaker. Was that more about the personnel and the shifting injuries around him, or is this some sign of a decline? Like, and to not know that answer is not great.
So, I mean, there are a fair number of needs here if we're going to add potentially like capable backup, like offense runner,
What is your biggest need for them then?
I think I still feel like it's a big.
Do you know why you're right? Just because the perimeter, like, unless you're going to trade Marcus Smart, Bane, Morant, and Smart, you just have so much equity tied up in there. And if you want to give Gigi Jackson a shot, you're just kind of looking at their perimeter rotation. It's okay. Our bigs right now, I mean, Clark's coming off a major injury. I know he played by the end of the year, but you have Jaren Jackson Jr. and Santi Aldama as bigs that I think right now that you can count on. So that's not a lot.
Neither of whom is like a true big, you know what I mean? Is a true big, because I think they prefer to play Jackson off the, roving more, like not as your like always in the middle backline guy. Now, the Boston and the way OKC is building out its roster means like, oh, you can kind of not have that guy sometimes. And that works if your perimeter guys can all play a certain way. So maybe that is part of that's an alternative route for the Grizzlies. If it's like, we'll just, Jackson's our Chet Holmgren / our Al Horford, and we're going to live with that. And we'll figure out how to beat you in other ways. I still just want someone in there. You know what? I just want the Steven Adams like presence back. Like, even he wasn't a great defender, but just like someone that's gonna bang around and like offensive rebound and do all that.
Would you, if he would come back for the mid-level, and would you go the Jonas Valanciunas route?
I don't think he does what they need defensively. But like, so give me someone that size that skews more towards just like I am the backline guy.
In terms of free agents, I just don't think the answer's out there. Although the mid-level is not getting you Nick Claxton, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I would be. I mean, we basically already said so. We thought he was going to get more
18
than 20.
plus. The cap holds 18, whatever. I think it's at least that probably for him.
And then it's like, I mean, Goga would be interesting, but I don't like how many minutes can you rely? Is that the route you go where it's, well, we still want Triple J at the 5 to be a primary weapon. So that might have some greens. Mo Wagner would be great for this team. I just don't see Orlando declining his team option, but someone to look at. I do have 2 trade targets though. Actually 3 that I love for them, but they would have to be pretty aggressive. Well, maybe 1, not so much. RW3 on this team.
Yeah, I think like the only concern I have is the optimal role for him, yes, I agree. He should be a target. The counter would be, doesn't the best version of him kind of do what you want the best version of Jaren Jackson to do defensively? Like, which, you know what I mean? You want him on a corner shooter and he can swoop in and mess stuff up.
But kind of having both those guys where like they could be fine is like, so that's a good point though. I didn't think of it that way. Other names I could say, I love them as a Jared Allen team if he becomes available.
That's a good one.
I thought about, and then Atlanta's bigs. I don't love this, but like if you're just looking for another stopgap, get to Clint Capella's number. Like let's say they draft Alex Sarr, but also let's say they draft Alex Sarr. What about Onyeka Okongwu here?
Yeah, I think he works really well too. I think of the ones you mentioned, Jared Allen is like, okay, that changes things, I think, most fundamentally for them.
They're in like a weird spot though, where they would need a third team because of what Cleveland's not going to want draft picks back in that scenario, right? And they don't have like, what's the name? They're not going to want Marcus Smart. So there's no name on here this team is like, I would expect their offseason to be rather uninteresting unless they really try to I still love Jeremy Grant here. I don't think that they'll do anything about it, but because they don't have the information on, okay, well, how does this, like even their Gigi Jackson, just throw him into like, that's what our best 5-man unit profiles as is Triple J, Gigi, Morant, Bane, and Smart. You just don't have the intel on whether that works or not. So how are you supposed to make these decisions?
Right. No, and that's interesting. That's a good point because my mental shortcut for the Grizzlies is really like, just kind of have everybody back minus the Adams piece of it and Smart on the roster now. And it's like, well, you won 50 games twice. Like we're just running it back. We know how all this works. And actually they kind of don't, like to your point, like they can't be sure how some of these newer pieces are going to fit with the old guard. And it's like, this team's not necessarily in a position where it's the smartest thing in the world to sort of take a feel it out year or, maybe a feel it out pre-trade deadline period. You kind of got to
have to though, just because you don't know. Like,
right.
I think there's obvious, like your point on RW3 is not one I'd made, but I'm thinking like, it's just going to cost like a protected first, like just go do it. Yeah. In my mind, that makes sense. There's not a lot of names that I could think of right now where it's like, well, yeah, they should just go do that. And like Jared Allen would be V1, I think. And even that's like, well, we do have all this equity tied up in Jared. So how much are you giving up for Jared Allen? He has 2 more years of being a bargain, but will he sign a 3-year, basically $100 million extension? I don't know, but that's like of all the names that I've listed, I'm like, that's the only one where, given the information we have on the Grizzlies, I'm like, if it costs real stuff to get him, I would do it now. Everything else, I mean, if you threw Mikal Bridges out there and they could get him, yeah, of course. But of realistic targets, I almost be like, well, maybe you should just wait and like, let's see what we have here.
Right. Maybe wait for, because I think we agree, like the guy is not like making himself known right now that they should get. So just hope that changes over the next few months.
Do you think they have where Jazz fans are going to get mad at us? Although shout out Jazz fans were like, most of them were vibing our equivocation on what the team was doing. There were some people that were mad that we were talking about Larry marketing trades. I was like, well, we spent 10 minutes on them renegotiating him too. Like we're just covering all our bases. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Do they have enough stuff just having all their own draft picks? If they really wanted to get if those two were even semi-available, could they go after a Marketing or a Bridges? Or do you think like they're a notch short of what we'd be like? Let's assume the Thunder just aren't involved on either of those guys for some reason.
Yeah.
That levels the playing field a little bit.
I lean towards they're a little short of like the blow you away offer, but I thought you were going to start talking about Walker Kessler, who I think some of the reporting recently said like there's someone they may consider. I think Jake Fisher had it. I think, sorry if that's wrong, that Kessler, someone Utah might look to move. And Kessler, there's your interior presence. There's your conventional backline big for Memphis. If Kessler, for whatever reason, is available and the Jazz want like 9 and another pick and something, like I think that's something I'm looking at for sure if I'm the Grizzlies.
Oh yeah. Well, why do the Jazz need more picks?
They don't. But if you're talking about Kessler being available, again, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, just like his name appeared and you
could loop in if they're sending him to team X, you could be team Y that tries to trade for Kessler. It could be like a 3-team situation.
Yeah. Right. New Orleans.
Yes. By the way, I love these podcasts. They're so easy to timestamp. There's only 5 of them. Love it.
So man, if this is another team with quite a bit to talk about, I guess. Notable free agents: Jonas Valanciunas, Najee Marshall. We mentioned both of those guys. Jose Alvarado's got a team option. They can decline that to like raise his pay because it's just he's making nothing right now. I don't know what.
I don't think they will just because of what you're about to say.
Yeah, it's just like he's so cheap. I just don't feel like you just game it out and we'll worry about it later. So they are projected to be about within 15 million of the tax, not including re-signing Marshall or Valanciunas. So, well, we can talk about how likely either of those things are, but could be able to get the full MLE, I guess, but more likely the mini MLE. So notable extension eligibilities. This will be the springboard to kind of get us into really the meat of what this offseason may be. Brandon Ingram is eligible for 4 years and almost $209 million. Trey Murphy also eligible for a 4-year, $174 million deal. I'm rounding up here, or 5 and 225. So the Ingram trade / extension / what do we do with this guy, I think is probably the primary issue we should discuss. I don't know how. Maybe the way in is just like if you have the choice of extending Ingram or trading him, which are you picking? And if you are trading him, what are you targeting as the main return?
I'm assuming he's going to ask for the max, which I'm not giving him. And Shamit Dua of In the Know just recently reported that the team is going to try and get him on below the max. I don't know what the number is where I'd be like, I need to pounce on extending Brandon Ingram. The way you phrased it with some of the stuff with the with Jose Alvarado is I might just game it out if you don't think the right trade offers are there, because if I'm going to trade, I don't want to say full stop I would trade him, because I think if you're going to trade him, then you need to make sure it doesn't even become I know everyone wants them to diversify their front court slot beside Zion Williamson. You better be getting a floor general back in that Brandon Ingram trade. And I don't buy into this idea that Cleveland would want Brandon Ingram if they're moving Darius Garland or even Donovan Mitchell. I don't even know if Atlanta would want Brandon Ingram if they're moving Trae Young. I'm going to ask you this as an exercise. Would you trade? The salaries don't work, but would you trade? Maybe there's something else in there. Would you trade Brandon Ingram for DeJounte Murray if you're this team?
I think I would.
So would I. No. I'm sorry, newsflash. DeJounte Murray's a better player.
Yeah.
In terms of if you're looking for the larger roster fit, and also factoring in his contract is maybe part of how I'm viewing that. 4 years and 100 and 14, 19, whatever. And Brandon Ingram, very good at getting to his spots, generating his own looks. And we've seen flashes of, he's operating well off of Zion, or look at him, he's getting all the way to the basket, or look at the passing he's going through. Oh, look, he ratcheted up his defense. It just feels like too many of those residual elements come and go for me. And for a team that needs bankable passing, independent of Zion Williamson because of his injuries, and then also just higher end 3-point volume, Brandon Ingram is too much of a question mark in both of those areas for me to just say, if we're talking 4 years and 160 he's willing to sign for, I just don't think that's what he would accept. So I almost lean to answer your question is like, I would probably look to move him, but then when I'm looking at these trades, he's on an expiring contract as an imperfect player. I don't know which team is like, we're going to give you a shit ton of stuff for Brandon Ingram. I don't have that team.
That's the issue. It's the part of it is his game, and part of it is like some of the disappointing stuff with Team USA and this most recent playoff appearance. And part of it is the contract situation where it's like all these things are combining to force down the return package the value of the return package you might get for a guy who, like, in a vacuum is 26 and has been an all-star and has shown flashes of being someone that you can sort of run a good offense through. But it's just like, I feel like that's all buried under all of the other factors I mentioned. The other thing, as we're talking about this, like, I think CJ, and I agree with you, the big man thing is one, but the lack of just like, get a ball hand, like get a real point guard in here who can shoot it. Like, that doesn't work with CJ McCollum. I kind of feel like he's quietly the guy that they need to be working much harder to trade. And that's because he is hard to trade. Like, he's almost 33. He's going to make 36 million next year, or no, 33, and then another 30, almost 31 the year after that. And I think if you're really looking to get New Orleans to the next level, and that involves moving Ingram out so Trey Murphy and Herb Jones play more, you still need to upgrade that or change, maybe not upgrade the McCollum slot.
You know why I disagree with you is because his 3-point volume went up there that I think he's too, like, if you're trading him, you're getting someone who's going to replace that and then some, fine. But I also think, and you can't do this with Brandon Ingram, is that someone that you could say, we're paying you this money, but like you can come off the bench.
Yeah.
And you're not going to do that with Brandon Ingram. And so I don't mean to shit all over Brandon Ingram, who I think is a really good player. And I think I've been higher on this just past season, which even when stuff was working between him and Zion, they're so separatist. Like it's just not, you're not seeing a ton of two-man stuff between Zion and Ingram. And so get a primary ball handler, another ball handler who will run stuff alongside. That's why I think they should be a Trae Young team. I would love them as this doesn't come up, but like LaMelo Ball, if he is gettable, this would be a great team for that. If I am them, in terms of more realistically, I'm wondering, what do you have to attach to Brandon Ingram in terms of both salary to make it work, and then any draft assets to get two of DeJounte Murray, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and Onyeka Okongwu from Atlanta? Like that feels like an ideal sort of match for them. Like, oh, they could check multiple boxes for us in one shot. I mean, you could work the money so you get all three of those dudes. If they draft Alex Sarr, like maybe there's a way to kind of finagle that, but like that's sort of where I'm at with New Orleans. And then whatever you do, I mean, if you have DeJounte Murray, you play him with Trey Murphy, you play him with Herb Jones, you play him with Zion, and hopefully you've changed up the big man spot somehow. You could bring CJ off the bench. And that's ultimately why I don't feel as strongly about, I don't think they should go into, oh, we won't move CJ. That's not what I'm saying at all. But if some team is more intrigued by Ingram, the player, or just the fact that he's on an expiring contract, that's just where I'm at with CJ.
I think maybe I should, as we're talking about it, I think part of the reason I view CJ as like a bigger priority or a bigger, like, I don't know, issue than some of the other things we could talk about with the Pelicans is, as you look at him, he's really hard to trade because like what team out there is like, who we need is a guy that does these things. Like he's not, like he's very, great shooter, like can get his own looks, all that stuff. Bad defender, doesn't have great size, like
he was better defensively this year, sort of in that corner role.
But where's the team that is like, we're giving up a lot of like real shit because we need CJ McCollum? Like, so I'm just viewing it from that perspective. Like, I don't feel like there's a huge market for him. And that to me is like a way to say he's like, that's a bad sign.
If you were the Pelicans, you would prefer to go the route of, not that you're viewing CJ as a total negative, but if a team's rebuilding, they're not going to value that contract. You would rather do, let's say, Dyson Daniels and first round equity on top of CJ McCollum than whatever Brandon Ingram is worth to the team that like you're engaging with, and then having to flesh it out. I would say you'd be attaching lower end stuff to Brandon Ingram than you would CJ. So you would rather go let's throw this more. Dyson Daniels probably gets sent out like any of the stuff we're mentioning.
Yeah, I know.
But so you would be more in line with, I'll throw higher end draft equity. I would rather attach that to CJ McCollum than attach lower end draft equity to Brandon Ingram.
I think the way I would frame it is I would hopefully use Ingram to get the guy that is going to replace McCollum, and I'm moving McCollum in another deal.
Oh shit.
That like gets me maybe gets me my center or gets me something, and I'm having to attach stuff probably to get off McCollum, but that's how I would structure it. Just because like if you're trying to get the guy to replace McCollum, you can't use McCollum and a bunch of sweeteners to really do that, because like that doesn't make any sense. So like to the acquiring team, it's like, take the Hawks as example. Like why are the Hawks going to take back McCollum and sweeteners for Murray, right? Like, and then you have the salary issue too. I think McCollum, the McCollum thing just happens after the fact, assuming you have used Ingram to get the guy that will play McCollum's position next year.
Okay. So you're basically just blowing up the Pelicans.
I mean, I listened. David Griffin told me that we've seen enough, and so I'm just trying to follow his vision.
What's more pressing though? Because I feel like this is divisive. I don't even want to necessarily call it a center, but it's like finding a different frontline partner for Zion, or I'll call it a floor general. What do you view as the more pressing need?
I think the floor general one is like the higher level one. But this team just doesn't have Larry Nance cannot be your starting and closing center next year, I don't think, if you want to really meaningfully change things. So I guess like the center spot feels like the more glaring need because they just don't really have anybody. Whereas McCollum is like, he's fine, and maybe better than fine at that spot. But I do think ultimately, biggest of big pictures, you can go find a center. You can luck into the right center cheaply. The McCollum thing is sort of the harder, move to execute. So I don't know if that answers. I guess if I have to say one or the other, the floor general thing strikes me as like the the bigger deal. But it's harder to solve that one.
When you're looking at free agency targets for them without knowing what they're going to be working with, and even if they are going to have the full non-taxpayer mid level, I don't even view them as a Tyus Jones team, although he could, in theory, work. Chris Paul would be fun here if he just becomes available. But like, it feels like if they're going to do anything that materially impacts their roster, it's going to be done via trade, especially because the only reason I don't have them penciled in for the full MLE is you would expect them to retain one of Jonas Valanciunas or Najee Marshall, right? They're not just going to let both of them walk. Yeah.
I mean, like it could just be both because like they will scour the market and say like, well, we're not, and we know what the Valanciunas experience is. There's no.
What do you think is more likely? They keep both or let both walk?
That's interesting. Because I feel like it's one or the other, probably. I'd say if it's me, I would probably keep both and then hope I could turn them into something later, just like asset preservation,
use it as like salary ballast. Yeah, for Valanciunas specifically. Yeah, I'm with
you. Because if you let both go, like, are you gaining enough? You know,
it obviously depends on what else they're doing, but trade targets we haven't mentioned. I already said the Trae Young, LaMelo Ball stuff. Jared Allen, of course, they've been in love with him for forever. Two names that would stand out. I don't know if he's gettable. Wendell Carter Jr. in Orlando is just a name that's mentioned all the time. I don't know what it takes to get him. Mm-hmm. And then the other one that I have listed here is Naz Reid. Would be great. I know he doesn't give you a ton of rebounding or necessarily traditional rim protection, but he'll slide his feet on the perimeter. I think he's a better defender than people think that he's shit. And I just staunchly disagree on that. I thought about like, if the Celtics, what if they get pocket shy? Like you calling about Al Horford, like, hey, you guys trying to save off that super tax or that not, but the big man, I would argue that it might take more assets to get the right fit on the perimeter, but it feels like that's still an easier box to check than the type of big man you would ideally want next to Zion.
You know who I always forget about, and then when I think of him as like a team that needs defense or a center, and it's like, oh, it's him. What about John Isaac? Like, what if because he's not he's not the truest center, but he's got the like block rates of a center, and the versatility he would bring you with him and Herb and Trey Murphy, like you could really mess around with like, we're gonna put Zion like on the bench on defense. We can do whatever we want with this versatility.
My issue is, what's the over under on the number of total games Zion and Isaac play next year? If we set it at 65, that's
the thing is, if you make the Isaac move, a team that acquires Isaac, I don't even know if he's available. I don't know if he should be available. Is like, we're just hoping the like 25 straight games that he's healthy and can play significant minutes happens in May and June. Like he's that level of acquisition where we're going full ceiling and we're acknowledging the floor is like, he doesn't play a minute, you know?
I wonder, it feels more likely to me that Wendell Carter Jr. would be available because Orlando would think we can get by if we have Mo Wagner, Paolo Banchero, and Jonathan Isaac, because like we can futz and fiddle with the big man spot using that. And whereas just like with Wendell Carter Jr., it feels like he might have more matchup limitations, even though he really does. He's the better setter than everyone I just listed.
Right.
So I want to make that clear.
And like,
they tried J.I. at the 5 stuff. I mean, you keep both is what you should do, but I didn't think of Isaac. That'd be interesting, but that's a lot of injury risk on that front line then.
Yeah, for sure.
Our final team, the San Antonio Spurs, they're probably going to be quick just because they don't have a lot. They're key free agents. Jetty Osman, Devontae Graham is guaranteed $2.85 million of his $13.65 million salary. Mamu Skelly is a restricted free agent. Charles Bassey is non-guaranteed. Dominic Barlow, who I actually very much like, is a restricted free agent. Their best spending tool, they could get up to like $20 million in cap space, so that's noticeably more than the mid-level. But they could also kind of easily operate over the cap and say, this is actually my most fascinating question for them, is it better to have that cap space or to roll over the Devontae Graham expiring salary slot, and then maybe we just bring back Jetty Osman or give raises to some of these other guys? We operate over the cap, and we're having some of these players come back, and we have the mid-level and the biannual. I kind of prefer the latter route. I'm not going to lie.
So tell me why, because I think I maybe go the other way. Tell me why it's a bad idea, or the worst of the two options, to use that cap space as a way to take on more salary with picks or whatever assets attached in like an unbalanced trade.
I guess you would have to tell me what that now, okay, the caveat is if they're going to go out and get Trae Young or Darius Garland or DeJounte Murray, I'm just assuming they won't. And by the way, that is their two biggest needs to me, or their three biggest. And I'll go in order of what I think is most important. In upgrade from the floor general spot over Trey Jones, a better or more consistent or just like more defined front court partner for Victor Wembanyama, where Victor Wembanyama is still doing the primary big stuff. Like Zach Collins doesn't do it for me. Jeremy Sohan at this point, RIP to my stock in him because I might be ready to sell it. I don't know. And then they also like kind of need shooting. So if you told me that they were going to go out there and like really work the trade market, because I don't see what free agent, and I guess if you told me Tyus Jones is going to San Antonio and it needs $15 million in cap space to do it, then yeah, I'll go the cap space route for sure.
Yeah. I think it's a, would you agree? It's like, it's a close question. And it is like, we're talking just in pure hypotheticals. We don't know if it is Darius Garland or whatever that we need to be able to take on an unbalanced
Gosh, did you mention LaMelo on this team? Why am I'm the one who said they shouldn't trade LaMelo, and I'm just like, in the Southwest Pacific, man, imagine what LaMelo would look like next to John Morant. Like, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. The other thing, I mean, this isn't really like, I don't know how deep we need to go on this, but like the Wembanyama piece of it complicates everything, because on the one hand, it's like you just listed this team's needs. These are huge needs. Floor general, another big guy to play with your superstar, and then shooting. Like, you got a lot to deal with, but it's like, which means like you are not far along. But also you have Wembanyama. So it's like, should we just say like, we're going to try to win 40 games next year and then add 5 to that or 10 to that for the next couple? Cause Wembanyama might be that good. You know, it's a timeline question. It's like, how urgently do we operate because we have this guy?
And the other thing that's tricky with, well, it's not tricky, but that you have to factor in with them as to why they might not be more aggressive is they are currently sitting on 2 first-round draft picks. And so they could use that number 4 and number 8. So not even 2 first-round draft picks, but 2 top 8 picks. But the other thing that I can't bring myself to stop thinking about is, do you know what their net rating was when they played Victor Wembanyama with Trey Jones last season?
I feel like I've heard this, and it's shockingly good for how bad the rest of the team was, but you'll have to tell me the number. 2,700
possessions, and they were a plus 5.2 points per 100 possessions in that time. That's in the 79th percentile of just net rating. And the fact that they were still below average offense, they just weren't nearly as bad as they were when they weren't. I look at it and I say, you could view that as one of two ways. Imagine like if you just get Tyus Jones, like it doesn't need to be a star or go all in. Think about how much better you get. But then it's also like, well, if we're that good, like with that, what happens if that spot becomes Trae Young with Trey Jones as the backup?
That's where I go with it. That's to the what do we do timeline wise? Because there's your evidence of like, it does not take much to be like actually just flat out good for a team that was flat out horrible otherwise. So like if you get a star in there, so does that mean they're just plus 10? You know, when Wembanyama's out there with this new point guard, like I mean, year to year, this stuff fluctuates a lot, but like it's not. It should be simple with a team that just drafted its cornerstone last year. And it's like deliberate. Let's use these picks. Let's build around them with young guys. But it is not simple because of what Wembanyama looks like.
And also, if you told me they've left the draft with Reed Shepherd and then one of Cody Williams or Ron Holland, I might just be like, they could do whatever the fuck they want.
Aren't you ecstatic? Like, how fun is that?
I'm just like, I'm like, you know what? Like, you could still use the floor general type, but you just go sign Tyus Jones and you just keep at it. Everything will be fine.
Yeah, I mean that's the most. Interestingly, that is what conventionally a team in this position would do, is just use those picks, right? But to me, like, I think I'm more excited about that than if they got Trae Young, which makes no sense. But like, I just, because now it's like, oh, these 3 guys, look how good this team is going to be in a couple of years. I don't know, that's a fun way to go.
And I have my list of targets for them, by the way. I'll run through them quickly. I mentioned Tyus Jones. That just feels like if he's not going to be in Washington, I'll almost be shocked if he's not in San Antonio. I'm not going to lie. Najee Marshall, of course, but I actually believe it. Could they convince, like, hey, Nick Batum, come play with Wemby? I'd love it. Chris Paul, if he gets waived, like, you can come in. Isaiah Hartenstein next to Wemby. So if you're going to be like, you have 20 million in cap space, that would be something that's semi-intriguing. But again, it comes back to, do we want to play those two together for 15 minutes a game, and then the other 20 minutes from Wemby come as the solo big? Is that like a good enough split for you? Other names to consider: lower end, like Simone Fontecchio would be good from shooting. Do you just bring back DeMar DeRozan if his, Chicago made this trade? Or are they just not going to pay him a bunch of money and you want a floor general? Probably not. Spencer Dinwiddie, how much does he cost? Klay Thompson would be really fun on this team. If you have $20 million in cap space, even if it's just to kind of drive up their, a rival's payroll, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, do you take a flyer on Markelle Fultz? We already mentioned Garland, Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, LaMelo Ball as trade targets. Andrew Nembhard could be an interesting trade target for them, as could TJ McConnell. I don't hate Colin Sexton on this team. Alex Caruso and Josh Giddey have already been traded for each other, ironically. A name that and maybe this is where we wrap up, unless you have anything to add. How do you feel about Anthony Simons on this team? Does he not bring enough of the secondary playmaking for you? I'm going to fold this. I don't want this to influence you, but I thought about it and I'm in love with it and I would do it.
For Simons?
Yeah. I don't know what you have to give up. Like, is it Keldon Johnson and something?
Yeah, I do like Simons there. And weirdly, because I think like in a vacuum on most teams, I'd rather have KCP, for example, of the names you listed, and certainly like Murray and like Garland and Trae. But like Simons feels like someone that is still young enough. Like it just kind of makes sense. Young enough, like is kind of not a 1, but kind of not a 2, can definitely shoot it, which helps Wembanyama as a floor spacer. Like, and also you get him out of Portland and you get him on a more like more functional team where maybe, as much as we like Simons, don't we kind of feel like we still aren't sure because he's had a couple like really effective seasons, but like on a Portland team that was like actively trying to lose down the stretch of those.
Yeah.
Both of those seasons really. But yeah, I think he's an interesting one. Better than some of the like more established guys for sure that we've talked about.
Tangentially related, which team is more likely to reacquire their own draft picks, Atlanta or Brooklyn? Looking at Murray to San Antonio or Bridges to Houston.
Atlanta or Brooklyn? I think probably Brooklyn. The Murray going back, like it makes sense, but that would be so weird. So it hasn't been that long either.
Right. It's just like be kind of awkward for everyone. But that's why I kind of support it.
Yeah, just because you want chaos. I get it.
And I will say I tried to figure out how to get Naz Reid to this team, but for Minnesota not being interested in picks unless they just wanted the cap relief and picks. But Naz Reid next to Wemby would be horrifying for the rest of the league.
Oh yeah. You get your copycat league. Everybody's got to be 5 out now, and you still have to be able to defend. So that works.
But I think we're in agreement that I think the biggest move they might actually make is like they sign Tyus Jones. If it's bigger than that, I'll support it. But I think they'll use their picks, maybe sign a Tyus Jones level player, and that'll be that.
I'm totally fine with that.
You got anything else? Did you want to take us out of here?
Sure, I'll take us out. I think banner pace for us. Pretty good job.
Still over an hour. You're welcome. And by the way, this is going to be, we've published a podcast every single day, I think, since Sunday. Do we not have one on Monday? We've put out 6 podcasts this week so far. And counting.
Just a lot of hashtag content being produced. And proliferated. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching. If you have not already, please remember, rate the podcast highly in parentheses, give positive reviews, make sure you're sharing as much as you can, friends, enemies, acquaintances, strangers, help spread the word. If you want to get more involved, you can join our Discord, as Dan mentioned earlier, link for that in the YouTube and podcast description. I think that's going to cover it. Got a couple more of these left. We'll get those out in short order. And then the NBA draft will be like a thing that happens.
Where can they find us for the NBA draft? No, that's not free agency. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Where can't you find us? We are doing a draft day stream, but the free agency one is the big block. You're going to see a lot of us for a long time.
3 hours.
3 hours.
Just standing Grant. So that'll be like, that's a relatively short podcast for us.
Basically a podcast. Yeah. So not that different. Just different medium. Thanks again, everybody. Shouts out to Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.